woman from the northeast was duped by a man she met online.
It was the original baby. We'd made a mistake and this was the original baby coming back. But there was never any red flags right up until that dusty boiler that Karen suspected.
Mr. True Crime. By the time she was 41, Coleen Greenwood had found her balance. She was a proud mom of 2 teenage girls and had worked hard to build a peaceful life after her marriage ended. She wasn't chasing love, but was open to it, if the right person came along. Then she met James Scott. It started with a dating app in late 2014. It was just a quick match, nothing unusual, but this one felt different. He said he was a firefighter in County Durham and Darlington. He was polite, good-looking, and easy to talk to. From the beginning, he made her feel special. He paid attention. He remembered how she liked her coffee and which pastry was her favorite, the little things most people forget. Their chats turned into long calls, which became dates. Before long, they were spending more and more time together. To Coleen, it felt like something real, something worth holding on to. But there was one problem. James Scott wasn't who he said he was. The flowers started arriving within weeks, sometimes even a bouquet a day. Sunflowers on gloomy mornings. He'd show up at her work with her favorite almond croissants. Not to show off, but because he cared. It was the kind of love and attention she hadn't realized she'd been missing until it was back in her life. He spoke with love about his children, 2 daughters from a previous relationship, and how he talked about being a father made Coleen admire him even more. She saw a depth in him, a mix of kindness and stability. Being with him just felt easy. Their relationship found its rhythm and slipped right into their daily lives. Her friends thought he was great. And Coleen, she was in love. She'd found someone she could rely on, someone steady who made her believe in forever again. James Scott didn't just have a job, he had a calling. As a firefighter with County Durham and Darlington Fire and Rescue, he spoke about his work with quiet pride and humility. He was brave, grounded, and selfless. Sometimes duty called without warning, but even then he stayed close in little ways, sending quick messages when he could. A fire truck when heading to a blaze, a car rushing to a crash. He ensured she felt connected to him even in the middle of chaos. After his shifts, he'd return to Coleen's home in Chesterler Street, his uniform still carrying the smell of smoke. She'd greet him with dinner, listening as he shared stories about the people he'd helped, the lives he'd touched. Once, he showed her a thank you card, a simple, handwritten note from a young boy he had rescued from a burning house. He would show her official-looking work emails from the fire service, schedules, team updates, safety briefings. Everything about his professional life added to the image. This man ran into danger when others fled. Coleen loved that about him. She loved the way he spoke about his daughters. He made her feel protected, not just emotionally, but in every way. In James Scott, she believed she had found not just a partner, but a true hero. As weeks turned into months, James and Coleen's relationship deepened. It wasn't just about romance anymore, it felt like a genuine partnership. They spent weekends together, tackled everyday life as a team, and found comfort in being with each other. For Coleen, it was the kind of relationship she had always hoped for. Steady, mature, and safe. Coleen introduced James to her sister and her sister's boyfriend, Kevin, wanting him to be part of her world. Just like with her, James won them over quickly. He was warm, thoughtful, and full of funny stories from the firehouse. He had a way of making everyone feel like they'd known him forever. Soon, James became a regular at family dinners and get-togethers. He and Coleen shared deep conversations, swapped dreams, and talked openly about their future together. Early on, they had agreed on one thing: no more children. They both already had kids from past relationships and felt their families were complete. It was a loving, thoughtful decision. But then, unexpectedly, Coleen found out she was pregnant. The news shook them both. After many long, painful talks, they decided not to continue with the pregnancy. It wasn't an easy choice, but they made one together. Coleen was heartbroken, and after that, she grew much more cautious about their physical relationship. The emotional weight was heavy, but James didn't push her. Instead, he stood by her, offering quiet comfort, and then he did something extraordinary to ease her mind. He chose to have a vasectomy. It wasn't something Coleen asked for, it was his idea. his way of showing her she would never have to carry that burden again. He went through it without hesitation, quietly, and without making it a big deal. When the results confirmed a 0 sperm count, he simply handed her the paper with a calm smile. It was the kind of gesture only a man deeply in love would make. 2 months after James's vasectomy, the family went out for dinner. One of those easy, happy nights filled with laughter, shared plates, and warm conversation. But midway through the meal, something felt off for Coleen. A wave of nausea hit her, and a quiet unease settled in her stomach. She leaned over and whispered to her sister, who laughed and teased, "You sure you're not pregnant again?" James didn't laugh. He froze. He grabbed his coat and hurried to the nearest Tesco without saying a word. Minutes later, he came back holding a pregnancy test kit. Coleen took the test right there in the restaurant's restroom, and it was positive. Shocked, pale, and wide-eyed, she returned to the table silently. That night at home, she took 4 more tests, one after another. Every single one was positive. Coleen was stunned, and though she never said it out loud, a small part of her was terrified of what James might be thinking. But he didn't accuse her, question her, or pull away. Instead, he looked at her with steady, calm eyes and took her hands. "I trust you," he said. "I trust you more than anything." He smiled softly, gently brushing a tear from her cheek. "Maybe it's the same soul," he whispered. "Maybe it's the baby we lost, coming back to us, a gift from God." They didn't understand how it had happened. Science had no explanation, but they knew they would keep this baby. 6 months into the pregnancy, James moved in with Coleen. Their once quiet, neatly ordered home now buzzed with life. Tiny onesies draped over chairs, ultrasound pictures pinned to the fridge, and the sweet, joyful chaos of getting ready for a new baby. Then came Christmas. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine, laughter spilled from the kitchen, and fairy lights danced in the frosty windows. Coleen stood by the tree, her hand resting on her growing belly, when James called her name. She turned to see him holding a small gift, wrapped in silver paper. Slowly, she opened it. Inside was a book, Coleen Scott's wedding diary. Confused, Coleen looked up, and there he was. James, down on one knee. In his hand was a ring, and on his face, the softest, most sincere smile she had ever seen. "I've already planned everything," he said. "The venue, the date, even the little cake you always dreamed about. All that's left is your yes." He looked up at her, eyes shining with love. "Will you marry me?" Just 5 weeks after James's heartfelt Christmas proposal, joy quickly became urgent. One morning, Coleen woke with sharp pains and a deep, unshakable fear. They rushed to the hospital. Coleen was taken in for an emergency C-section. Hours later, through tears and overwhelming love, they welcomed a beautiful baby boy into the world. They named him Charlie. A week later, Coleen was discharged, cradling their tiny miracle in her arms. Her daughters fell in love with their new little brother. It felt like he had always been part of their family, as if they had simply been waiting for him to arrive. The house filled with laughter, baby giggles, and newborn life's sweet, messy chaos. Late nights were exhausting, but full of love, teamwork, and quiet 3 a.m. cuddles. At last, they were a little happy family, held together not by perfection, but by love. With Charlie safe and thriving, the wedding preparations picked back up. James even took Coleen to meet their wedding planner, talking through colors, flowers, and all the little details that made it feel real. For a while, everything felt like a dream slowly blooming into reality. But life, as it often does, had other plans. It started small. James found a lump. At first, he brushed it off, tried to downplay it, laughing it away like it was nothing. But deep down, he was scared, and Coleen could feel it. After finally seeing a doctor, James sat Coleen down one quiet evening. He tried to stay calm, but fear was in his eyes. The wedding, the planning, the excitement, everything froze in place. Their world shrank into hospital visits, long silences, and the ache of not knowing. Days blurred into each other, each one heavier than the last. They held each other tighter, spoke softer, hoping for the best, but quietly bracing for the worst. And then, on the second visit, a twist of fate. It was a misdiagnosis. James didn't have cancer. The relief hit like a tidal wave, and they felt like they had been handed their future back. With renewed joy, the wedding plans picked up again, with even more heart, gratitude, and love than before. Because now they understood, every moment together was a gift, and nothing could be taken for granted. Just as the dust settled and happiness began to feel steady again, another unexpected gift arrived, not from fate, but from family. James's mother, a sharp and successful sports agent who had spent years navigating the fast-paced world of contracts and negotiations, was now enjoying a slower, sunnier life in southern France. One breezy afternoon, during a video call, she shared some surprising news. She was arranging an early inheritance for her children. It was generous, far more than anyone had expected. But beyond the money, it was a message. Live now, build now, and don't wait for someday. James, always a big dreamer and careful planner, already had a vision forming. Over late-night cups of tea and quiet conversations, he shared his idea with Coleen, a property management company, something they could build as a family. "You and Karen are naturals," he said. "You both know property. Mum's got several investments. Karen's got her place. And you've been in the industry. Why not build something that works for all of us?" Coleen hesitated, not because she doubted James. She trusted him with her whole heart. But starting a business meant more than just money. It meant trust, teamwork, and weaving family into business, a delicate, complicated web. Still, the more they talked, the more it made sense. Karen was immediately on board. She loved the idea of building something collaborative, something empowering. The three of them, Coleen, James, and Karen, began sketching a plan. It was slow, steady work, built on long talks, shared spreadsheets, laughter, and dreams scribbled late into the night. What started as a simple idea soon grew deep roots. Not just a business, but a foundation for their family's future. A way to build stability, create opportunity, and most importantly, leave a legacy. But James's mother had more than just property on her mind. Retirement hadn't dulled her ambition. If anything, it had given her room to dream even more significantly. One evening, she floated an idea with a glass of rosé in hand and the sun setting behind her terrace in the south of France. A bar, or maybe a restaurant, something classy. In the family name, Scott, she said with a playful grin. It's about time we had something people could walk into. And just like that, the Scott family's next big venture began to take shape. Karen, always the risk taker, didn't hesitate. She believed in James's vision and decided to leap of faith. She started pouring money into the restaurant idea James had been quietly sketching for months. James had even found a potential space. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it had promise. With enough work, he said, it could become something special. Karen invested nearly £55,000, pretty much everything she had saved over the years. But the dream didn't move as quickly as they hoped. Delays crept in, issues with planning permission, problems with permits, and flaky contractors who promised the world but delivered little. The excitement of the early days slowly gave way to frustration. As obstacles kept piling up, the timeline stretched and the shine of the venture started to fade under the weight of reality. Then came the trip to Texas. James flew out to bring his daughters home, and the wedding date was finally set. Everyone was excited. Coleen had even picked out tiny matching flower crowns for them. But once James landed, he went quiet. Calls grew shorter, messages were delayed, something was off. And then the door opened. James stood there, bag still in hand, face pale. "I can't do it," he said. Coleen stared at him, heart hammering. "Can't do what? We're not getting married." Silence fell like a thunderclap. James explained that his ex-wife had refused to let the girls travel with him, breaking him. Getting married without his daughters standing by his side felt wrong, unbearable. So he made a decision, impulsive and devastating: cancel the wedding, again. Just months before, they had postponed the first date. This second blow hit harder and more profoundly. But this time, Coleen wasn't crumbling. "Not again," she said, her voice steady, eyes shining. "We're doing this. We'll celebrate with them later. We'll throw another party just for them. But I'm not telling everyone it's cancelled again." James hesitated, torn between heartbreak and gratitude. And in the end, love found a way. Not through vows or veils, but togetherness. They convinced the family to take the day off. No ceremony, no wedding cake, No grand walk down the aisle. Instead, they spent the day outside, laughing, talking, sharing a meal under the open sky. It wasn't the wedding they had planned, but somehow it was exactly what they needed. Because even when plans fall apart, love doesn't. Life slowly settled into a fragile rhythm in the weeks after the wedding that wasn't. But under the surface, something had shifted. Still feeling the sting of pouring nearly £55,000 into the family venture, Karen began checking up on her properties, places where James had supposedly overseen significant renovations, including installing new boilers. On a quiet Saturday, she and her boyfriend Ryan visited one of the flats. At first glance, everything looked fine, but something felt wrong. Dust coated the new boiler, thick as if it had been untouched for a few weeks. Uneasy, they went to another property. Same story. Not one to ignore red flags, Ryan picked up the phone and called the boiler installation company James had supposedly hired. The answer sent a chill through both of them. "That model?" the rep said. "We haven't manufactured that one in years." That's when everything started to unravel. Karen reached out to a tenant who had supposedly had James do maintenance months earlier. The tenant admitted they'd had doubts too, but James brushed them off when they tried to follow up. No receipts, no proper servicing, just vague reassurances that everything was sorted. That night, Karen called Coleen, her voice tight and low. "Something's not right," she said. "You need to look at everything, all of it." Coleen wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. She needed to believe it. But a gnawing unease had already taken hold, a creeping doubt, whispering questions she was too afraid to voice. Then Ryan called the wedding venue James had claimed to have booked. "Sorry," the manager said, puzzled. "We don't have any booking under that name. Never did. There is a wedding that day, but it's not for James Scott. We've had that one scheduled for months." It was the moment everything cracked. The lies, the delays, the unexplained trips. The charm that had always seemed so genuine now looked warped, twisted, hollow. The family was shaken like mirrors turning to glass, letting the ugly truth shine through. Coleen was frozen in a world that suddenly didn't make sense. Every memory, promise, and quiet moment of love was now under suspicion, and deep down, in the part of her heart she tried to silence, a terrifying question clawed its way to the surface. Had the man she built her future with been lying all along? It all came crashing down around her. What had once been a fairy tale of second chances and new beginnings had spiraled into a nightmare she never saw coming. The man she had loved, trusted, and built a life with, the father of her child, was now at the center of a growing web of lies, missing money, and false identities. Karen's savings, £55,000, gone. The business James had spoken about so passionately. It didn't exist. No paperwork, no registered company, no investors. It had all been smoke and mirrors. And worst of all, James had never intended to build anything real. Karen pieced it together while Coleen and James were still traveling, returning to what they thought was home. Panic gripped her. She called her sister. "Don't say anything yet. Don't let him know we've figured it out. Just get home safely." But it was already too late. James must have heard something, maybe a snippet of a hushed phone call. Perhaps he just felt the shift in Coleen's energy, the slight tremble of her hand when she reached for her phone. Whatever it was, he sensed it, and he acted fast. Without a word, James pulled the car into a quiet, empty driveway. His eyes, once so warm and familiar, were now cold, unreadable. He unbuckled his seatbelt, stepped out, and without warning, handed baby Charlie into Coleen's stunned arms. Then he was gone. James leapt into the driver's seat of another car parked nearby and tore away, tires screeching on gravel. As he sped off, he passed Karen, pulling up in her car. James, or whoever he was, looked right at her and gave a slow, mocking wave. She missed him by 60 seconds. In that instant, everything shattered. The life they had been building and the future they had trusted in collapsed in a heartbeat. What had happened to their happy family? What was real? Why would James, no Greg, do this? The questions were endless. The answers were few. They went to the police immediately. Luckily, Ryan had thought ahead. Weeks earlier, sensing something was off, he had written down the license plate number of James's car. The police ran it. The result was staggering. The car wasn't registered to James Scott. It belonged to someone named Greg Wilson. Greg Wilson. The name meant nothing at first. No one in the family had ever heard of a Greg Wilson. But then again, they had. They had lived with him and loved him, trusted him, built a life and a future with him. Coleen's hands trembled as she typed the name into Facebook, dread rising thick and fast. The screen refreshed, and there, staring back at her, was the image that stole the breath from her lungs. Greg Wilson, smiling, an arm wrapped tightly around another woman, and 3 boys. He had an entire family and a whole other life. He was married, had children, and lived just 30 miles away. Coleen stared at the screen. Karen gasped. Ryan leaned back in his chair, stunned into silence. It wasn't just a lie, it was a double life. Everything they thought they knew, the man they had welcomed into their homes, hearts, and lives, had never truly existed. James Scott was a carefully crafted illusion. Behind him stood Greg Wilson, a man with secrets buried so deep they were only now clawing their way to the surface. Durham police launched an investigation almost immediately. But for Coleen and her family, this wasn't just about fraud or stolen money. This was about betrayal, about trust shattered in the most personal, unforgivable way. This wasn't just the story of a con man. It was the story of a family in ruins, trying desperately to piece together the truth from the ashes of a beautiful lie. Coleen didn't want to believe it. Not at first. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone who looked like him. A cousin, a distant relative, anyone but him. But the more she looked, the harder it became to deny. There he was. James, only now he was Greg Wilson. Standing next to another woman, his arm draped affectionately around her shoulders, smiling like nothing could touch them. Except now, the truth was touching everything. Coleen kept scrolling. The profile wasn't private, just quiet, like it had been forgotten or barely used. But it was enough. Tagged photos repeatedly showed Greg with the same woman. Birthdays, holidays, and family outings. And eventually, 3 boys, his sons. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a mistake. It was a carefully crafted lie. He had lied to all of them, not just to Coleen. Every so-called emergency shift, every last-minute call-in, every weekend trip that ended with vague, half-hearted updates. He hadn't been working. He had been with them, with his real family, just 30 miles away. And that was only the beginning. James, no Greg, had spun endless stories about a millionaire mother, a glamorous life, an inheritance waiting for him, big dreams of businesses and family ventures. None of it was real. Coleen, sick with betrayal but fueled by anger, dug deeper. She found the mother. It wasn't hard now that she had his real name. She was a regular woman with no estates, luxury, or high society lifestyle. The shock ran both ways when Coleen reached out to her because Greg had lied to his mother too. According to her, Coleen wasn't Greg's partner. She wasn't even his girlfriend. She was his boss. He told his mother he was managing Coleen's supposed property portfolio. Another mask, another fake role in Greg's twisted play. From there, the pieces fell apart fast. The Washington fire station, Coleen and Karen called. No James Scott. No Greg Wilson. No record of him ever working there. Greg claimed the 2 little girls were his nieces who had supposedly picked out gifts and sent handwritten cards. Are they stock photos? The presents? Bought online and shipped under fake names. Manufactured sweetness builds trust and creates the illusion of family, warmth, and belonging. And then, there was the vasectomy. Greg had once confided in Coleen that he couldn't have any more children, part of why Charlie was such a miracle. But now even that came into question. Had he lied to gain sympathy, to cover his tracks? Or was it just another thread woven into the ever-growing tapestry of deception? It was emotional devastation for Coleen, a hollowing heartbreak she couldn't even begin to put into words. For Karen, it was worse. The £55,000 she had invested, money she had worked so hard to save, meant for her future and independence, was gone. Not just stolen, erased. It wasn't just betrayal, it was fraud. And it left Karen broken. She was forced to declare bankruptcy, a fresh start crushed before it could begin. The shame, stress, and bone-deep feeling of being so thoroughly, ruthlessly duped haunted her every day. And from Greg? Nothing. Only a single card arrived weeks later with no return address. Just one scribbled word. Sorry, no explanation, no apology. There has been no closure, but Greg hadn't disappeared for good. The police finally tracked him down through one of his old bank accounts. When they found him, the next twist landed like another gut punch. Greg wasn't alone. He was with another woman, not just dating her, and she was wearing an engagement ring. Greg had told her he worked for the army and was about to be deployed overseas. He wanted to settle down and build a life before he left. Another lie, another future he never intended to keep. It was the same story, just slightly rewritten. Another woman, another life, another lie. Greg was about to do it again. Coleen and Karen had once believed this nightmare was uniquely theirs. But now they understood. They weren't the first. And if they hadn't uncovered the truth, they wouldn't have been the last. But the road to justice was anything but quick. Greg Wilson, the man who had worn many masks, shattered many hearts, and left a trail of wreckage, vanished into the slow grind of investigation, paperwork, and legal delay. For nearly 2 years, Coleen, Karen, and their family waited. Waited for answers. Waited for justice. Waited for him to finally face the consequences of everything he had done. And then finally, in late 2023, the verdict came. Greg Wilson stood in court. No longer the smooth-talking James Scott, no longer the charming partner, the heroic firefighter, the devoted father figure, just a con man, a fraud, a man found guilty of deceit, manipulation, and theft. The judge didn't mince words. Greg Wilson was sentenced to 6 years in prison. For Karen, it was never just about the money anymore, though the loss still stung. It was about reclaiming her dignity, her peace, her belief that trust and hope could still exist. For Coleen, it was about healing from an emotional scar so deep that it once felt like it would define her forever. But it didn't. She healed, slowly, painfully, but she healed. The journey wasn't easy. There were sleepless nights. There were awkward questions from Charlie as he grew older, questions she had to answer with more honesty than she ever wanted to give. There were days when trusting anyone felt impossible, when love felt like a language she no longer spoke. But time, stubborn and steady, softened the sharp edges. Eventually, Coleen met someone new. A kind, steady man who didn't promise grand adventures or whisper irresistible stories. He didn't sweep her off her feet. He simply stood beside her day after day, step after step. And in time, that was enough. And now, life looks different. It's peaceful and honest. That same steady man, one who never needed grand gestures to show his love, went on to marry Coleen. He even adopted Charlie, raising him as his own, a fresh start. A real one this time. As part of the court's ruling, Greg was ordered to repay £36,000 to Coleen, a small but meaningful attempt to make up for the emotional and financial wreckage he left behind. By January 2024, he had paid back around £24,000, a small measure of justice. But justice nonetheless. Karen, too, is rebuilding, slowly but with fierce determination. The scars are still there, but now they serve as reminders of strength, not weakness. Proof that she stood up, spoke out, and refused to let shame silence her. Because in the end, Greg Wilson's most excellent con wasn't just about money, it was about trust. After everything she went through, the lies, the betrayal, the shock of discovering the truth, Coleen could have stayed quiet, but instead she chose to speak up. She wrote 2 books about her journey, Playing with Fire, The True Story of Fireman Scam, and Healing from the Burns, Life After Fireman Scam. In them, she shares the whole truth. The charm, the manipulation, the red flags she missed, and the strength it took to start over. Writing became a way for her to take back control, to help others, to heal. What was once the darkest time in her life is now something she uses to protect and empower others. She didn't just survive, she found her voice and used it to light the way for people facing the same pain. Fire was used as a weapon in Coleen's story, a symbol of control and cruelty. But in the following case, it became something even more tragic. Click on the next video to hear the heartbreaking story of Robbie Middleton, a young boy set on fire, and the shocking truth about the suspect who walked free for years.